Girl who had been single for 18 years received a love letter. The next day, she found me with a blushing face and rejected me, saying students should focus on studying. However, I showed no concern at all. Instead, I encouraged her to study hard and strive for excellence. It turns out the one who had a crush on the girl was the original owner of this body, while I was once the reaper who made the entire M country tremble. They deployed over 400 elite intelligence agents for 8 years, keeping me under strict surveillance without pause because they feared the supernatural ability I controlled. Due to my overwhelming power, a tumor developed in my brain. In the final minutes before my life ended, I used 16 stolen nuclear warheads from M country as leverage, demanding they take no action against my subordinates for 3 months after my death. By then, they would vanish beneath the waters, disappearing from the world completely. Although I had arranged escape routes for everyone, when they learned of my death, they each ended their lives in their own ways, choosing to follow me in this special form. This loyalty was because I had once saved them from dire situations. I thought I would go to hell after death, but when I woke up, I found myself in a classroom 21 years ago. Going to school really isn't much different from hell. Just as I was lamenting fate's joke, a scream broke the silence. A beautiful girl suddenly fell from the sky. Thankfully, I reacted quickly enough to prevent her from being smashed into pixels. Afterward, we were both called to the director's office. The academic director first asked about my injuries, then questioned why the girl wanted to jump from the building. The girl called him Dad, explaining she wasn't trying to jump, but had fallen while looking at the scenery. That's when I realized they were father and daughter. After learning the reason, the academic director asked me to get checked at the hospital, but I declined his kindness, saying I just needed some rest. Following the address in my memories, I returned to this unfamiliar home. After thoroughly searching through everything, I learned that the body's original owner was named Cheno, an ordinary student. His parents had divorced years ago, and 6 years ago, when his mother remarried, she left several tens of thousands for his grandmother to raise him. However, she also misappropriated a large sum of public funds to help her new husband repay gambling debts. Fortunately, this loner persona would save me a lot of trouble. At this time, the calendar on the doorframe caught my attention. It seemed the time left for me wasn't much. In 15 days at midnight, that girl would face the most terrifying event of her life. She was one of my former subordinates, codenamed Firefly. I had to find a way to go to Seoul to prevent the tragedy. But currently, I had no money for plane tickets, no passport or visa. Moreover, my abilities couldn't be activated now. This really was an unprecedented predicament. Meanwhile, the girl was in her room, recalling what had happened during the day. Her face suddenly turned bright red. It turns out that when she saw me below, she unconsciously leaned out to get a better look. That's when the falling accident occurred. At this moment, she discovered something. It was the love letter Shino had written to her. The next day, the girl came to me. I curiously asked why she suddenly sought me out. She nervously said she had read the love letter but wouldn't agree to date. My first reaction was thinking the original owner was quite brave, daring to pursue the academic director's daughter. Seeing no reaction from me, the girl emphasized again, telling me not to do similar things in the future and to focus on studying. I asked about her midterm exam ranking. The answer was 196th place. Indeed, she needed to study hard. At that moment, the girl suddenly felt like she was the one being rejected. In class, the teacher announced the school's upcoming exchange competition, and the location was in Yian. This gave me a method to reach Seoul, so I immediately raised my hand to sign up. However, it drew waves of mockery from classmates. After all, in their eyes, I was just a complete failure. After school, I was inexplicably cornered in an alley by several thugs. The leader, who called himself Brother Deo, said I was tired of living for writing a love letter to his woman. He came to teach me a lesson. Unexpectedly, such a thug. And girl drama would happen to me. However, they chose their location well. Even though I had lost my abilities, the combat techniques in my mind were enough to make them taste pain. At night, the girl was bringing dinner to her father. Just as she entered the school, she found me sneaking around in the parking lot. She walked up and questioned what I was doing, accusing me of trying to unlock someone else's car. Would you believe me if I said I couldn't remember which car was mine? She turned to leave after calling it nonsense. I suddenly remembered something and stopped her, saying I needed her help. I told her I wanted to participate in the school's competition but didn't have the qualifications to compete. Since her dad was the academic director, she surely knew other ways. When she asked about the reason, I made up an excuse about wanting to see snow in Yan'an. It was a bit forced, but she still agreed to ask around. At this time, I also remembered Brother Day's matter, so I asked if she knew about him. After learning that Day often cornered her at the school gate, and she always avoided him, I told her dad wouldn't be able to appear for a while. There's a saying that bone injuries take 100 days to heal. Originally thinking the matter was resolved and preparing to leave, Son suddenly exclaimed, "You stabbed the wrong car lock. The broken car over there is your ride." I put on a cheeky expression and asked her, "We're not even in the same class. How do you know so much about me?" Before I could suggest that she had a secret crush on me, my stomach growled right on cue, and I coincidentally spotted the food in her hands. Although it was the academic director's dinner, whose wool isn't meant for shearing. At this moment, the academic director was puzzled. Strange, why is there one less chicken leg in today's meal? The next day, I found the competition team leader, Teacher Luo. He wasn't a formal school teacher, but rather a person in charge from an education company. It was precisely because of this that I saw an opportunity for backdoor dealings. After handing over an envelope, Teacher Luo took a look, gladly offering to let me join the competition team as a volunteer. Before leaving, he mentioned that the list would be posted in the afternoon. Watching my departing figure, Teacher Luo felt I wasn't a simple person. After school, the girl walked alone on campus. Students nearby mentioned that the exchange competition list was out. Driven by curiosity, the girl checked the list and found my name on it. She actually believed my nonsense about wanting to see snow in Yan'an. Soon, the academic director's office door was pushed open. The girl told her dad that she also wanted to join the Yan'an competition group. The academic director explained that the spots were already full, but, unable to resist his daughter's soft persistence, he finally allowed her to go along with the school choir. 2 days later, at the platform heading to Yan'an, the girl looked around and finally spotted my figure in the crowd. She quickly waved to show her location. I was about to help her with the luggage, but unexpectedly, the academic director suddenly appeared, denying me the chance to show off. Then I got glared at fiercely. I was still wondering why the girl suddenly wanted to go to Yan'an. Meanwhile, the academic director, who came to see them off, was filled with thoughts of my cabbage running off with someone else. That afternoon, the train arrived in Yan'an. At this time, the girl was full of anger, thinking she didn't know what possessed her to come suffer like this. However, when I took over her suitcase and tossed her a drink, the complaints in her heart vanished in that moment. At night in the hotel, when Teacher Luo learned I wanted to leave the group for 4 days, he was 100 against it. After all, if an accident happened, a small role like him couldn't bear the responsibility. He started playing the victim, saying finding a job wasn't easy. Seeing I was unmoved, he prepared to use force to make me submit. However, he couldn't match my combat ability and finally had to compromise and agree. Thus, the Firefly rescue plan officially began. The girl had been used as an outlet for wealthy men's desires for 10 years. She thought of nothing but revenge. All this stemmed from one nightmare that shattered her once complete family. I brought her out during a mission, finally bringing a glimmer of light to her dark world. When I dealt with the guards and entered the room, I found her sitting on top of the target. She mistook me for a bodyguard, mocking that I came too late, and pulled the trigger without hesitation. I cursed her as a lunatic and carried her out of the room. Other bodyguards rushed in, but dealing with them was just a matter of moments. Later, I brought her back to my temporary base. The first thing she did wasn't to thank me for saving her, but to launch an attack against me. With a crisp sound, she fell asleep. When she woke up again, she found herself wrapped like a dumpling, hanging from the eaves. To this, I was completely unmoved. Until the next morning when I finally untied her. She asked why I saved her, and then assumed I coveted her beauty, looking like a little girl consumed by fear and hatred. The girl suddenly realized something. The man before her had unfathomable strength and could easily carry her through the encirclement. The next second, she knelt before me and said that as long as I helped her achieve revenge, she would do anything for me. Perhaps seeing her determination, I agreed. Over the next 2.5 years, she followed me, completing various training. Finally, on a rainy day, she successfully completed her revenge against the last person. In some corner of the city, she looked at the photo of her deceased family. She had already become a tearful mess. I silently held up an umbrella behind her. Later, I learned what she had actually been through. It turns out that, one night, a group of people first killed her father, then violated her mother in front of her. They brutally murdered her brother and mother, then finally took her by force in front of the sunflowers she had planted herself. At that time, those people didn't let her family reunite. Although she found a chance to escape and sought help from her father's friend, that night she was not only defiled again, but also sent back to those murderers. Now, with her great revenge accomplished, she had no more worries, so she vowed to faithfully follow me from that day forward. After all, her world had already turned completely dark. Only in me could she grasp that remaining ray of light. But I told her not to pin her hopes for light on others. If this world goes dark, then shine your own light. From today on, your name will be Firefly. Time returns to the present. At this moment, I'm crossing the border into kimchi country, preparing to head to Seoul to prevent this tragedy from happening. I needed to cross a minefield. Even though I was familiar with this route, I still stepped on a bouncing mine. This type of landmine jumps up and explodes once the leg is moved. Fortunately, I knew how to deal with it. I cut a piece of cloth from the school uniform as a pressure net, then took out a safety pin to secure both sides of the mine. I used pencil lead to insert into the mine's safety pin. Each step needed extreme caution. The slightest mistake would mean being blown to pieces. Luckily, after moving away, the mine didn't explode. When I reached a trench, thinking I could take a brief rest, 2 kimchi soldiers suddenly jumped down beside me. Everyone immediately had a standoff. This situation required swift resolution. A charging boar tackle knocked away the closest person, while I simultaneously pulled out a knife and threw it hard. With a swoosh sound, one person died instantly. The other soldier provocatively beckoned with his finger, as if to say, "Come at me." He was simply tired of living. With their clothes as cover, crossing the border checkpoint would be much smoother. 2 days later, I successfully arrived in Seoul and found Firefly, who was only 16 years old. Just in time, I saw her collide with someone. As she was about to curse at them, I came forward and grabbed her ear, telling her girls shouldn't use foul language. Hearing me call her Firefly, she angrily questioned my identity. I didn't explain much and just said, "I'm a person who fell from the sky, here to help drive away an approaching nightmare." Unexpectedly, she smirked, kicked hard in my direction, and then turned and ran. She found a police officer on duty and said, "There's a creepy guy over there," but I had already disappeared from the spot. At night, several high-level officials were holding a meeting. The lead man reported they had found a landmine in their border minefield that had been disarmed using special techniques. 2 personnel executing secret missions had also become casualties. They suspected this was a targeted infiltration incident, and orders from above were to find the infiltrator at any cost. All of this I was unaware of. At that moment, I was staying on the roof of Firefly's house. The scene of maternal and filial love inside gave me an indescribable feeling. However, what must come would still come. I saw a group of armed men rush into the courtyard. It seemed the nightmare was finally about to begin. A group of men in black broke into her home. Facing these uninvited guests, her brother was the first to step forward to stop them, but was quickly kicked down. They grabbed Li Yingwan's clothes and showed lewd expressions. I watched all this, but knew it wasn't time to act yet. Dealing with the scum would be simple, but leaving dozens of corpses in their home would inevitably bring them bigger trouble. So, I had previously created smoke in the neighboring room. As the clock hands moved, sirens sounded from outside. One person opened the window to check and saw fire trucks driving this way. Several men decided to take the family away first. Thus, the 3 were taken away from the courtyard. If there's no conflict with my previous life's memories, Liang Wen's father, Li Dongyi, should already be dead. Originally, He Zhengai and Li Dongyi were partners in a shipping business. Behind the scenes, He Zhengai conspired with the Chai and Chattison brothers to take over the shipping company. They joined forces with the Scum brothers to sink Li Dongyi in the sea. I quickly ran to the garage. Meanwhile, in the car, He Zhengai was internally fuming, recalling how he not only had a lower status than Li Dongyi, but also lost the woman he fancied to him. He expressed that he would properly taste the mother and daughter later. At this time, in a warehouse on the outskirts, Li's mother was begging several men to let them go. He Zhengai showed no sympathy and instead swung the whip in his hand, brutally lashing it across her body. Seeing this, her brother seemed to make a decision. The next second he charged forward, using all his strength to grab He Zhengai, but was whipped away, watching everything happening before her. Liang Wen hoped this was a nightmare she could quickly wake from. Suddenly, an image appeared in her mind. I am a person who fell from the sky, only to help disperse your nightmare. Just as she was dazed, a car burst into the warehouse with lightning speed. The commotion made everyone cover their heads. A hero should appear at just the right moment. Your car has some issues. Steering wheel drifts a bit, but, little Firefly, we meet again. At this moment, she felt something indescribable in her heart. Beside them, Chi Taiyong shouted for his men to kill me. Just as he was giving the order, a subordinate sneak attacked me from behind. I simply shifted my position to easily dodge. But what awaited him was a kick. With a bang, he fell unconscious. In less than a moment, screams rang out continuously. Seeing that all his underlings were no match for me, Chi Taiyong gritted his teeth and called for his brother, who had served in the elite forces, to act. Brother Chiong pulled out his weapon. I sighed helplessly, saying, "You're the second person who dared to draw a blade against me tonight." But he didn't listen and launched his attack first. First, the dagger brushed past my shoulder. Then he kicked the car behind me with power that was not to be underestimated. Finally, he delivered a dazzling series of thrusts, yet none of them caused me any injury. After experiencing his abilities, I told him, practice more in your next life. Seeing my arrogant attitude, Chi Taiyong also recklessly came at me again. I caught the timing to strike his wrist, and my arm quickly slid past his face. He instantly froze, unable to move. It turned out that between my fingers was a sharp blade, and so the elite Chi Taiyong also fell. Seeing this, He Zhang's eye filled with thoughts of escape. But how could I let such scum get away? I picked up the backpack from the ground and directly smashed it against the back of his head. He was knocked down as well. Shi Taeyong broke out in a cold sweat. What normal person keeps bricks in their backpack? He muttered. I told him, this was originally prepared for you. Unexpectedly, he turned his gaze to Li Yingwan behind me. The next second, he took her hostage, demanding to be let go. I slightly frowned, and then told Li Yingwan not to be afraid. Originally, I didn't want to use this move, but I might as well practice it on him. Along with a crisp sound, I used my abilities for the first time since crossing over. It was inevitably a bit strenuous. At that moment, Chai Taeyong's body couldn't move, feeling like it was being torn by the air. I slowly walked up to him, took the knife from his hand and said, "You're the third person to draw a blade on me tonight." Then, I extended my arm to block Li Yingwan and stabbed the dagger into Chi Taeyong's body. After successfully resolving this trouble, I stroked Li Yingwan's cheek and told her not to be afraid. I said I would disperse your nightmare. Due to excessive shock, she fell unconscious. When she woke up again, she found herself back home, and I had been watching over her the whole time. I told her this matter didn't need to be reported to the police, as all the trouble had been completely erased by me. Seeing her at such a close distance reminded me of the original Firefly. Unconsciously, I reached out, wanting to stroke her cheek. Perhaps not wanting too much connection with her in this life, I stopped my hand's movement. Unexpectedly, she actively grabbed my hand and put it on her cheek. After gathering her courage, she finally asked her doubts. She wanted to know who I was and the reason for tonight's events. But I just told her, little kids shouldn't ask so much. The specifics your mother will tell you. Just know your mother is a bit shocked and will probably wake up in about an hour. Your brother was tied up by me because his temper is too violent. After explaining this, I also reminded her to study hard in the future and not to curse casually. She readily agreed. However, what she most wanted to know was my name. I still said the same. Little kids shouldn't ask so much. Seeing me stand up to leave, she suddenly grabbed my clothes and asked if we would meet again. Hearing this, I asked her, "Do you like fireflies?" Her answer was yes. Her brother often took her to catch them in the summer. But I didn't let her continue and lightly touched her neck. I softly said, "Don't catch them anymore in the future." Then she fell into my arms. After who knows how long, she woke again from her dream. However, only she remained in the room. She understood that I had really left. Suddenly, she remembered something. She rushed to the study at the fastest speed and wrote down all my warnings one by one, feeling like something was forgotten. After hard thinking, she finally remembered the text on my clothes and recorded my school's name. Finding these words were Chinese, she remembered her brother's room had a translation dictionary. Little did she know, outside the window hung a person. It was her hot-tempered brother. With the help of the materials, she also found my school's address. Meanwhile, Teacher Luo's door was knocked on. It turned out the girl hadn't seen me for 2 days. She came to ask if I was avoiding her. Teacher Luo made excuses, saying I was sleeping, while picking up his phone to pretend it was a call from the academic director. The girl immediately panicked, begging Teacher Luo to keep the secret about her late-night visit. Then, she fled the scene, red-faced, without looking back. At this time, Teacher Luo shed tears of grievance. Being a working person is really too hard. Meanwhile, I arrived at Haijin Xai's secret residence, released him from the suitcase, and dragged him into one of the rooms. After moving aside the cabinet, revealing the safe inside, I told him to make a deal with me. "If you open the safe, I let you die with dignity." Haijin Xai offered his entire fortune in exchange for his life, but I didn't agree. Instead, I pointed at the safe, telling him, "Open it now." I no longer had to worry about money for food. Suddenly, I discovered photos on the wall. Grabbing his head, I asked about the yacht's whereabouts. As expected, he started bargaining, saying if I wanted the boat, I must spare him. I agreed immediately. And so, I drove the luxury yacht, while Zingy and Hainan Jan, who had bullied Li Yingwan, were kicked into the sea by me. Before his death, Hainan Jan was in a completely confused state. To let him die with some understanding, I told him. In your previous life, your best friend's daughter sought your help. Not only did you refuse her, but you also violated her that night. Such scum deserves death. Although using my abilities forcefully to save Li Yingwan caused a nosebleed, it seems I need more practice. But since everything ended perfectly, it was time to go back and check on the girl. Teacher Luo was the saddest teacher in the school, only because he had taken my benefits earlier and had to help cover my whereabouts in front of others. During this time, the girl came late at night. He pretended to dial her father's number, successfully sending the budding girl away. Helplessly, paper can't wrap fire forever. The school's exchange competition was approaching its final event. The girl hadn't seen me for 4 days, thinking I might have met with some mishap. She told Principal Fang about my disappearance, demanding that the school quickly notify the police to help search. Hearing this, the principal fell into thought. If he reported it to the police, his responsibility as the lead principal couldn't be shared. The stigma of a student's accidental disappearance would follow him for a lifetime, and his future prospects would be greatly affected. So, he immediately found Teacher Luo. After scolding him, he asked about my whereabouts. Facing Principal Fang's accusations, Teacher Luo was very dissatisfied. This guy, after all, was a relationship hire sent to the school by higher-ups just to hold a position for gold plating. Helpless against higher-ranked pressure, he could only meekly say, "This kid is playful." Probably went to a nearby internet cafe to play games. Principal Fang said they could wait a bit longer, but if I still didn't appear, Teacher Luo would suffer the consequences. Half an hour passed. The impatient Principal Fang found him again, demanding to check my dormitory. Several people came to the dormitory door. When opening the door, Teacher Lao's hand holding the key shook as if he had Parkinson's. Principal Fang, standing beside him, urged him to hurry. At this point, he could only bite the bullet. When the door was opened, Teacher Luo shed tears of emotion because, at that moment, I appeared before them. Witnessing this, the girl screamed while covering her eyes. Principal Fang then questioned where I had been. I explained that I had gone to an internet cafe to play games. Hearing this, he berated me for having no organization or discipline and prepared to give me a demerit after my return. But I glanced behind him, and Teacher Luo instantly understood. He hurried to smooth things over, saying, "The liaison activity is about to start. Now isn't the time to discuss this." This finally let Principal Fang's anger subside. At night, I knocked on the girl's door. Unexpectedly, it was her classmate who opened it. The girl first showed a mischievous smile, then moved aside, letting me look inside. It turned out the girl was bathing. I asked her classmate to tell the girl I would wait for her on the rooftop. The girl, who finished tidying up, came to the rooftop. At this time, light snow was falling. I handed her a can of cola. She told me drinking beverages so late would make her fat. I said, "Someone with your figure would look better with some weight." After taking another sip, she suddenly felt tonight's cola was especially sweet. My fingers touched the falling snow, and I couldn't help but sigh. Life between heaven and earth is like a white cold shadow, suddenly gone. Finally, I did something I'd been wanting to do for a long time. She thought it was about achieving the goal of watching snow together. Suddenly, I turned to look at her and asked if she could promise me one thing. At this moment, the girl was a bit lost, thinking I might make some excessive request. She thought she could accept hand, holding at most. If I insisted on kissing, Perhaps her cheeks might reluctantly accept, but absolutely no kissing on the lips. To her surprise, my request was simple. I wanted her help to write a self-criticism. The next day, in the academic director's office, the girl's father wore a serious expression, recalling the scene he saw at the station yesterday. Those two kids gazing at each other's eyes seemed a bit off. If he hadn't interrupted in time, who knows what inappropriate scene might have occurred. Thinking of this, the academic director decided to take the initiative. He must prevent his cabbage from running off with someone else. The girl's father, discovering his daughter, showing signs of puppy love, came to trouble me repeatedly, but still couldn't prevent his daughter's attempts to give herself away. One day, I was spacing out in class as usual when the noisy classroom suddenly went quiet. It turned out the academic director had taken over the classroom. He announced that he would temporarily take over future classes and arranged an exam, saying those who failed would have to sweep snow on the playground. During his announcement, he didn't forget to glare at me fiercely. This gave me a bad premonition. Sure enough, in the afternoon, I was arranged to sweep snow. The next day, although I passed, I was accused of copying answers and continued to face consequences. On the third day of sweeping, he found various excuses to put the blame on me, though I didn't seem to have offended him. At this time, the girl waved to me and thoughtfully handed over a water bottle, saying she wanted to help me sweep. The academic director, seeing this, was angered to the point of gritting his teeth. The next day, I had already formed a conditioned reflex. Hearing him call my name, I automatically grabbed the broom, preparing to work. But this time, he didn't have me sweep snow. Instead, he took me to meet the prison instructor. The instructor asked why I hadn't visited for a long time. At that moment, I was still confused, as I knew nothing about events before my rebirth. Later, after hearing the instructor explain, I learned that China's mother, Uko, was serving her sentence in their prison. Due to good behavior, she had earned the chance for family visits. The instructor came this time wanting to understand the situation. Thinking about China's family relationship, I could understand why he hadn't come earlier. The academic director seemed aware of this as well. He feared I might have too much psychological pressure, so he let the instructor return first, saying he would communicate with me directly. It turned out he had been paying attention to China's family situation all along and expressed that if I had any difficulties, I could discuss them with him. Seeing that it was late, he actively invited me to his home for dinner. At his house, the girl was eating corn on the sofa. Hearing the door open, she first greeted her dad, but upon seeing me appear behind him, she was so startled that she dropped the cob. She then rushed into her room at full speed, her little face instantly blushing red. She clearly hadn't expected me to appear at her home. Witnessing her behavior, I thought this girl was really cute. The academic director also reacted, realizing he had let a wolf into his house. The girl soon returned, now dressed in new clothes. Seeing that his daughter was about to give herself away again, he quickly arranged for us to do homework separately, me in the living room and her in the dining room. While I was writing continuously, the girl thought I might be afraid of her dad. However, in the next moment, I signaled her by tossing a paper ball in her direction. Written on it were the words, "Your dad's quite nice." The girl was relieved, thinking I had already approved of her dad. But wasn't this order of approval reversed? Of course, all of this was seen by the academic director. Another paper ball followed. When the girl read it, she couldn't help but giggle. It said, "Your dad's acting weird. He's been reading one newspaper for 2 hours." By this time, the academic director was already fuming. I had secretly sent his daughter 32 signals, and she had peeked at me 64 times. Finally, he couldn't hold back. He suddenly stood up and found an excuse to send his daughter out to buy cold dishes, thinking he could never let a wolf into his house again. At the dinner table, the academic director gave me a chicken leg. The girl followed suit, also picking up a piece of meat and placing it in my bowl, completely ignoring her dad. After noticing her dad's murderous gaze, she quickly moved the food into his bowl instead. Just a few minutes passed before the academic director declared that it was getting late and urged me to eat quickly and go home. However, I acted as if nothing had happened, even preparing to ask his daughter to add another bowl of rice for me. Unexpectedly, the academic director flatly refused my request on the spot and promptly drove me out. This gave me the feeling of experiencing in law conflicts in advance. Just as I was about to leave, I met a woman passing by who looked almost identical to the girl. It was very obvious she was Sun Kiki's mom. Outside, I found a car parked by the roadside. A cigar smell wafted from the vehicle, and it was identical to the scent on the woman. Could it be that the academic director was being cheated on? Tomorrow, I still had to visit the prison. Wrapping up loose ends for this body's original owner seemed like the next step. The next day, I brought gifts to the detention center and met China's mom. She understood her son must deeply resent her, but I told her that these things were in the past. Hearing this, she shed tears, moved by my words. Suddenly, she changed the topic, revealing that she had a child with her current husband, a daughter who was only 5 years old. That child was my half-sister. She wanted to ask me to check on her daughter's living condition. Although I was surprised to have a sister seeing her tearful state, I still agreed. The next day, led by Officer Luo, I went to my sister's adopted community. From her words, I learned that my sister had been given to her uncle to raise. Due to special circumstances, the parents hadn't left much money. The street office provided the child with a 200 yuan monthly nutrition allowance, and my sister's aunt was responsible for her care. Soon, we arrived at the destination. Officer Luo explained the reason for our visit. The man there showed a cold attitude at first, but after I presented the gifts I had brought, his demeanor made a complete 180-degree turn. He then called for his wife to bring out my sister. He mentioned that they cherished their niece very much, pointing out that even the sweater she was wearing had been bought recently. Afterward, I peeled a banana and handed it to my sister, who sat beside me. She swallowed a bite and then turned her head to look toward her uncle. The man, slightly embarrassed, told her to quickly eat. My sister happily ate the banana. I also gave her a fresh shell. Just as she reached out to take it, the item was suddenly snatched away by another child who made faces while saying, "This is mine." The man explained that the children were used to roughhousing but didn't stop his son's behavior. Soon, it was time for dinner. The woman was very attentive, constantly serving food to my sister. I noticed all of this carefully. After leaving my sister's residence, Officer Luo assured me that she would continue to keep track of the child's living conditions. I wouldn't let them suffer. I expressed my gratitude to her, but thinking back on my sister's various behaviors, my instincts told me this matter definitely wasn't so simple. The girl had been doing laundry and cooking since she was 5, all because she was adopted by a cruel family. The family pretended to treat her as their own on the surface, but behind closed doors, they made her do all sorts of dirty and exhausting work. There weren't any little girl's clothes on the family's balcony. The sweaters she wore were all leftovers from the woman's son. The little girl wouldn't even leave a single grain of rice when eating. No wonder her mother begged me to come check on her. Since I was reborn into this body, I had a responsibility to fulfill as a brother. So I knocked on their door again. The man didn't seem to welcome my arrival, but what I saw made me want to tear them apart alive. While washing dishes, my sister had accidentally broken one. The woman was now punishing her with a ruler, making her cover her mouth to stay silent. Without thinking, I kicked the man to the ground. When the woman noticed the commotion, she tried to rush over to help her husband, but I pushed her aside casually and dragged the man like an animal. The old woman told me to let go of her son, but I ignored her. When her daughter-in-law beat her own granddaughter, she could sit and watch calmly. Clearly, she wasn't a good person. Unexpectedly, she said these two females were money, losing burdens, blaming them for her eldest son being in prison. I was instantly furious. I dragged her son straight to the balcony and dangled him upside down outside. The man turned pale with fear and screamed for help. I told him to shut up and said I'd let go if he made another sound. Then, I warned the others not to come closer. Seeing the situation, the woman quickly held back the old woman, who was ready to fight to the death. She said, "We should talk things through." Only then did I throw the man back inside. Seeing her son out of danger, the old woman started cursing. Even the woman threatened to call the police to arrest me. I instinctively glanced at the man. He immediately stopped the two women's behavior, not wanting to die young. Then I picked up the kitchen knife and told them that if they didn't want to see blood, they should answer my questions honestly. The woman said I'd go to prison for doing this. I replied that I hadn't actually hurt anyone, so at most I'd get a warning. However, once I got out, I would definitely come looking for them again. The man quickly told her to shut up. Then, shakily getting up, he asked how I wanted to handle the situation. I said I wanted to take my sister away. The woman behind me said they were the legal guardians. I knew their goal was the monthly 200 yuan and the child support left by the girl's birth parents. So I told them I didn't need the money. They could remain the legal guardians on paper, but the child would live with me from now on. Seeing the man still hesitating, I kicked his knee without another word. There was a cracking sound, and he let out a pig-like scream. "Your son is only 7 years old, right?" I said. "I'm giving orders now, not negotiating with you." Hearing this, the woman finally felt frightened and told me to quickly take the girl away. I went to my sister's side and asked her name. When I heard her say her name was Goey, I glared at the people behind us. The Gu family didn't have a single good person. "From now on, you'll be called Cheno Yi," I said. And so I gained a sister. When we just reached the doorstep, I found a girl standing in the middle of the hallway. She angrily demanded to know why I wasn't answering my phone. Just as I was explaining that my phone had died, her attention was drawn to my sister. She wanted to know the girl's identity. I joked that she was my daughter. My sister played along and called me Daddy. The girl was so shocked, she collapsed to the ground. My sister noticed the atmosphere wasn't quite right and added, "Big brother, is this how I should call you?" The girl realized she'd been tricked and kept punching my chest with her little fists. Afterward, I asked why she was looking for me. She wanted to know where I'd been these past few days. A few days ago, her father had walked around the neighborhood dozens of times trying to find me a job. Last night, he came back with an injured leg. I didn't answer her question but grabbed her hand and asked how long she'd been waiting. Although she said it was just a while, I knew it must have been several hours. So, I prepared to take her home to rest. But she pulled her hand away, saying this wasn't appropriate. Only then did I realize it wasn't proper for a single man and woman to be alone together. Later, at a hamburger shop, I learned that the academic director once had a student who, like me, lived alone. However, that person often went out fighting and causing trouble. When the academic director tried to stop his behavior, he was forcefully pushed to the ground. One night, that student came to the girl's house saying, "I'm sorry, academic director," and begged him not to interfere. Later, that student died on the street. Since then, the academic director never took charge of a class again. Due to reduced income, he often argued with his wife. It seemed he was worried I would follow the same path as that student, which is why he paid such close attention to my life. At this moment, my sister was staring at me. The newly served ice cream sparkled in her eyes. The first thing she did was scoop up a spoonful and offer it to me. She begged me not to send her back, She begged me not to send her back, saying she could bathe, sleep, do laundry, and cook by herself. While comforting her, I told her not to be afraid. She would live with me from now on. The girl teased that my sister and I didn't look alike at all. I deliberately skipped this topic and asked why she wasn't going home yet. If her father found out, I would inevitably end up shoveling snow again. The girl explained that her parents had a fight today, and that, lately, the conflict between them had been getting worse and worse. I told her that children shouldn't meddle in adult matters. Soon after, I walked the girl back to her building. She thanked us very much for sending her home. Suddenly, she opened her arms, making me think the hug was meant for me. But the next second, I was left hanging. By my sister. Just as I was about to take my sister home, a car drove past with the girl's mother sitting inside. Could it be that the academic director was really being cheated on? This bald guy spent 200 yuan to buy a bicycle, but ended up offending someone he shouldn't have. Not only did he experience the torture of having his balls pulled, but he also lost his precious motorcycle that he had kept for 2.5 years. That day, I went to the parking lot as usual, only to find my old bicycle missing. I thought about asking the security guard uncle for clues, but seeing his leisurely manner, I decided to solve the problem myself. Following the principle that you have to spend money to catch wolves, I bought a new bicycle as bait. After several hours of waiting, 2 young thieves finally showed their hand. I followed them to a residential area dozens of kilometers away. This was a well-known local second-hand vehicle dealer. In the yard, the 2 thieves were introducing their stolen goods to the boss. When they mentioned the bike was from Jiangming, the boss still offered the original price. He then took out 2 bills and handed them over. Just as the thieves and the boss were haggling, there came the sound of someone banging on the iron gate outside. I wanted to communicate with the boss properly under the pretense of asking about something, but this baldy told me to get lost. Since that's how it was, these people needed to be taught a lesson. Seeing me swagger into the yard, he came forward, questioning if I was looking for trouble. Without any pretense, I told him to reveal the location of his safe. This baldy was quite particular. Before fighting, he introduced his background, saying, "Don't be fooled by my usual peaceful demeanor. When I get fierce, even I'm afraid of myself." Just as the fight started, he noticed something was wrong. His feet had been tightly wound up by iron chains. As I pulled in the opposite direction, there was a crack, the cry of his family jewels. Words cannot describe his pain at this moment. Looking up, he saw my innocent smile. He had no choice but to honestly reveal where he kept his money. Seeing that I, the king of hell, had left the yard, he immediately called for backup, asking his guys who were out to quickly return and get revenge. But I hadn't actually left. Instead, I went across the street and ordered lunch, thinking this trip hadn't been wasted. Just a few minutes later, I noticed the Baldy's guys arriving in response to his call. I asked the restaurant owner to pack up an order of Shan Jian Bao that I would pick up later. At this moment, the Baldy was feeling extremely frustrated because that move just now had cost him 60,000 yuan. He immediately ordered his guys to search everywhere to find me. Unexpectedly, his guys accurately described my physical features and asked the Baldy if it was the person standing behind him. At this time, I swaggered into the yard again. Seeing me so arrogant, he was furious beyond measure. He instructed his guys to lock the yard gate and ordered them to cut me into pieces. Facing the attack from one of the cannon fodder, I first grabbed his wrist, then quickly struck with a knife hand. The scene immediately erupted with screams. I picked up a wrench from the ground, and in just a few seconds I took care of all his guys. Even he ended up black and blue. But I told him to keep calling for help, declaring I wouldn't make another move until his reinforcements arrived. The Baldy knew he couldn't mess with the man before him. He immediately knelt down crying and apologizing, saying he still wanted to continue running his business. As it happened, I was getting tired of riding a bicycle, so I suggested he find me something with more power. Without a word, he led me to the corner of the yard. He said this motorcycle had just been acquired last week and had been modified from top to bottom. I mentioned it was still missing something important. The baldy understood immediately and took out his treasured carbon fiber helmet. He said he had never used these things, and I could take them to play with. That's how I went from an old broken bicycle straight to a cool Harley. Passing by the school, I happened to see the girl in front. I did a drift stop right in front of her. The girl thought she had encountered some hoodlums and was about to scream for help. I took off my helmet to reveal my identity. I invited her for a ride but was rejected because the weather was too cold. Suddenly, she angrily asked where I was looking. It turned out my gaze was focused on her chest because I could tell this accessory was quite valuable. I asked about the origin of the bracelet. From her, I learned this was a meeting gift from an uncle when she and her mother attended a gathering. She thought this thing wasn't worth much, and her mother agreed to keep it. Little did she know this was a Van Cleef Arpels piece. In an era where wages were just a few hundred yuan, how could something worth 5 figures not be valuable? I didn't continue to pursue the question. Instead, I handed her the Shangan bio I had brought back and then rode away on my motorcycle. She felt the warmth of the box with her hands, her face radiating happiness. Soon after, the girl went to bring her father dinner. Learning that her dad was busy with the new semester's class assignments, she quickly urged the academic director to eat first, saying she also wanted to experience being a leader. However, she had her own little scheme in mind. She quickly flipped through the documents on the desk and modified the contents of the file, putting her name and mine in the same class. Indeed, it proved the earlier statement. No matter how hard the girl's father tried, he couldn't prevent his daughter from throwing herself at someone. This inevitably led to her father targeting me intensely. On the morning of the new semester, my sister thoughtfully prepared breakfast, making me feel like I was being taken care of by her instead. But my sister suddenly showed a dejected expression, asking if she could not go to kindergarten, saying she could take care of herself at home alone. It turned out that a few days ago, when I was visiting the academic director's house, he learned from his daughter that I had taken my sister home to raise. Worried that she wouldn't be properly cared for when school started, he offered to help introduce a kindergarten to solve the current problem. I stroked her forehead, telling her not to be afraid. After all, we couldn't really keep a 5-year-old child locked up at home. That's how I took my sister to kindergarten. Inside, a group of children was crying for their moms and dads. Thinking about how my sister would have to stay here made my heart ache. Even though I had told her beforehand that she would need to stay here temporarily, my sister still felt upset. I had to tell her to just try it out today, and that I would come to pick her up after school in the afternoon. Only then did she reluctantly agree. Then, I arrived at the new semester's classroom. Just as I entered, I found the girl and her best friend among the students. Seeing the girl's face turn red like an apple, she inevitably got teased by them. Before the teacher arrived, I very conscientiously sat next to the girl. Very soon, however, I discovered something was wrong. This semester's teaching instructor turned out to be the academic director. To prevent his daughter from throwing herself at someone, he called out my name as soon as he came in, demanding that I sit in the last row. He also said he would have all subject teachers list me as a key monitoring target. I had no choice but to pack up my things. A student seeing me walk towards him thought he couldn't peacefully read his novels anymore, and said it was fine if I was pursuing the girl, but now he was being dragged into it too. However, after I mentioned several novel titles, he felt like he had found a kindred spirit. After school, I went to pick up my sister from kindergarten. I saw her little face full of grievance. The next second, she threw herself into my arms. At first, I thought she had been bullied in kindergarten, but it turned out she was just worried I wouldn't come to pick her up. Originally, I wanted to take her to the girl's house to mooch a meal, but the girl said her dad was working overtime, so dinner would have to wait for another day. That's when Loken noticed my sister beside me and offered her a piece of chocolate. My sister didn't reach out to take it. Only after I told her to go ahead and eat did she happily accept the chocolate. Seeing it was still early, Loken suggested we could go to the arcade first. Then he would treat everyone to a family bucket meal. Soon after, the group arrived at the arcade. Loken, to give me and the girl time alone, decided to go play racing games on the side. This must be what friendship between men is like. The girl suggested playing basketball games together. I told them to play first, saying I needed to use the restroom. Shortly after I left, a familiar face came into the arcade. It turned out the brother had just been discharged from the hospital this morning, and his guys had specially come to welcome him back. At this time, they noticed the girl in front of them. Da brother exclaimed that today was really a good day. Just as several people were about to get handsy with the girl, a hand landed on his shoulder. He was very arrogant 1 second before, but upon realizing it was me, he was instantly dumbfounded. The guys on the side couldn't care less at that point, cursing and pointing at me. Loken also heard the commotion and came over, standing in front of me and asking who was causing trouble. This guy still wouldn't back down, even coming forward ready to fight. But when Loken said his father was Lu Dason, everyone froze in place. After all, small-time troublemakers like them didn't dare cross such a powerful family. Characters like them couldn't afford to offend someone of that status. Loken shouted, "Brother Hulu, someone wants to hit me." The burly man in the corner instantly lost interest in playing cards and pushed through the watching crowd to the center of the scene. Loken pointed at Dao Brother, saying, "This was the person who wanted to hit me." Now Dao Brother couldn't clear his name, even if he jumped into the Yellow River. Burly man grabbed Dao Brother's clothes and rewarded him with a big slap right away. Unexpectedly, Dao Brother said he had already agreed to leave out of respect for Boss Luo. Hearing this, the burly man angrily scolded, "You dare say you're giving face to my boss," and gave him another slap. The scene was simply too brutal. The burly man asked Loken how to handle it next. Loken didn't want things to escalate further, so he told the burly man to let them go. And so, several people were driven out of the arcade. From then on, Dao Brother's name disappeared from the underworld. At this time, Loken noticed the atmosphere was off, so he quickly explained that this arcade was his family's business. This was no ordinary rich second generation. He was clearly the heir to an underworld empire. However, the name Luo Dayan wasn't unfamiliar to me. In my previous life, in his early years, he was just a worker shoveling sand at a state-owned sand pit. Later, he rose to become a local underworld figure, building quite an empire through forceful takeovers. Later, his business caught the attention of bigger forces, and he ended up permanently disabled. Counting the time, the Luo family probably had about 1 or 2 years of glory left. But this Loken was a friend worth having. I would help him if I could in the future. At night, the group returned to the girl's home. After knocking, there was no response. The girl didn't know where her parents had gone. Seeing this, I asked her to watch over my sleeping sister, saying I would come pick her up in the morning. Facing her questions about where I was going, I just told her not to ask what she shouldn't. I arrived at a construction company. After some searching, I found the academic director discussing something with a middle-aged man. I saw him hand over a briefcase, telling the man to take it first. But the man slapped it away. The money in the bag instantly scattered on the ground. The man scolded him to get lost, calling him useless, before leaving without looking back. At this time, the girl's mother arrived late. The academic director first scolded his wife, then prepared to give her a slap, but in the end he couldn't bring himself to do it. His wife, seeing this, told him they could discuss it properly when they got home. Watching their dejected figures leave, I understood the matter definitely wasn't as simple as it seemed. Just because the man spread rumors that the girl's father was a deadbeat, I turned their company upside down. If it weren't for the boss behind the scenes having a strong survival instinct, he would have nearly ended up being buried alive. The next morning, many students gathered at the school gate. After persistent efforts, I finally squeezed to the front, only to find the girl wearing a terrified expression. It turned out someone was publicly saying her father owed money and wouldn't pay it back. Due to the crowd, I didn't step in to stop it. At this time, the academic director arrived late. He questioned the man why he came to make trouble before the repayment date, then handed over a briefcase, telling them to get lost and saying he would definitely pay the rest. When the man saw the cash in the bag, he first mocked the academic director for being a poor man, then called his guys saying they'd come back another day. The girl wanted to say something to her father, but the academic director didn't respond. He didn't want his daughter to see him in such a pathetic state. I understood that his teaching ideals, which had supported him for half his life, completely collapsed at this moment. In the classroom, I asked Loken to help inquire about the identity of those people from earlier. Although he was curious about my reason for doing this, he agreed right away. After all kinds of rumors were circulating in school now, and the girl had been taken home by her father. Soon I arrived at the company's entrance according to the address Loken gave me. The person who opened the door was the troublemaker from the school gate. He first questioned who I was looking for. After I said, "Looking for you," I kicked him hard in the chest without mercy. The kick sent him flying backward, landing heavily in front of the others. Then I told everyone present to resist as much as they wanted because, right now, I was very unhappy. As soon as I finished speaking, some guys rushed over. What greeted them was a violent collision. A powerful impact knocked one guy unconscious immediately. After doing this, I told them to try harder. Shouted that they would take me down. However, in just a few seconds, they were all lying on the ground, moaning in pain. Then I picked up their boss and asked for the safe's location. Unexpectedly, he pretended not to know. I simply broke his pinky finger. He instantly let out a heart-rending scream and honestly revealed where the money was hidden. So, I told him to fill up this backpack, adding, "If it's not full, we'll use your flesh to make up the difference." After handling this, I also made him